Hi there, I'm AK, and here are some less obvious tips for workflows and music production with Ableton Live session mode. Tip 1. Live 9 gives you the ability to write automation into clips. You can also use modulation. You can also use modulation and automation at the same time in the same clip. Automation writes an absolute value to the parameter you've chosen between 1 and 127. Modulation, by contrast, writes a relative value to the parameter between 0 and 100%. So for instance, if we're automating the volume of utility while also modulating its value, we're essentially drawing two different curves that move one knob. And this can move parameters in some really cool ways. This gets to be more fun if, say, you are modulating and automating the value of a filter cutoff on a synth. Here we'll borrow a technique from one of my other videos and unlink the filter envelope from the clip size so we can draw in some automation that repeats. Then we can further alter the movement of this parameter over time with a different envelope describing the modulation of this filter. Again, between 0 and 100% of where the filter cutoff is as it moves through the automation. It sounds complex, but it's really just two mod sources for the same knob. What's cool about this is that automation sets an absolute value, which therefore affects the range of possible values for the second relative modulation source. Tip 2. We all know that in session mode, you can drag in a bunch of clips and set up follow actions to randomly play any of the clips in a block, which gets switched by some time interval that you specify here. What I like to do is to take one or two silent clips and add them to the block of clips that you're using. You can record a silent clip or just bring the gain down on one of the existing clips you have. I'll set the execution interval on these follow actions to be relatively low, make sure legato is turned on, and then I'll play through the follow actions. I end up with slightly more musical results because every once in a while it will add a rest to our sequence. You can rename the silence clips to say rest for the sake of organization. Tip number 3. Building on the last tip, once you have a little sequence of follow actions going on that you like, it's easy to record a whole bunch of these automated changes using our transport record directly into arrangement mode. One thing you can do while recording to spice up your sequence is to highlight all of the clips that aren't rests, and then place your cursor on the timing interval selector. While you're recording, use the up or down arrow keys to change the interval at which a random clip is selected. You can also turn on and off legato while doing this to create some interesting stutters and breaks. Once you're done, press stop and then press tab, and your entire performance of all of these random clip launching is in arrangement mode. Tip 4. The default project template is a great way to customize live so that when you open live, you can immediately start making music. This also helps the consistency of your tracks when you start to develop your own naming and coloring conventions. But why have just one template? Technically, all a template is a project file, so I have a bunch. I put them all in one folder so they're easy to see. Here's a template for making bass patches. Here's one for making presets on synths that I frequently use. Here's one for making a DJ set. Sometimes I'm not in the mood to write a track, and when I go to my templates folder, I'm relieved to learn that there's more I can still do and be productive. So now you have yet another way to ignore your social life and spend your time in a dark room producing music. Tip 5. So if we take an arpeggiator and add a randomizer, and then put the scale plugin after it, what we really have is a random melody generator that works by selecting a key and just playing a single note. I like to have one of these tracks in each of my sets. If I'm ever stumped during composition, it's helpful to play with a little randomness that's in key. The arpeggiator's gate and rate controls are super useful in this setup, as they determine how often notes will be played and how long they'll be played for. It doesn't matter what key you strike to trigger this melody machine, as long as you match the scale plugin with the key of your song, it will play notes at random in that key. As an added bonus to this setup, get rid of whatever synth you're using on the melody generator itself. Turn that deviceless MIDI track into an input track. And then you can send the MIDI from this track to an existing instrument rack. And record the randomly generated notes themselves. So you end up generating MIDI melodies that you can actually use and further tweak. Tip 6. Remember that when you are in resampling mode on a track with record enabled, Live will capture your entire master output and record it onto that track. This means that you can do cool things like use the playback scrubber with loop enabled on a warped track as a way of resampling and mangling existing audio. And you can easily record that into another track. Tip 7. I like to use symbols, arrows, dashes, and hyphens in my clip names in order to visually reference things. This helps you stay organized, particularly if you use session mode for live applications and don't want to rely on a sober mind capable of reading small print in the dark. Tip 8. Stick an operator or any synth into your project, mute it, and then type in a repetitive pattern. Now, you can put gate on another track, use the sidechain input of the gate device, and select that muted MIDI track, which we're not using for sound, but it becomes a cool way of controlling the volume of the track you put the gate on. How you set this up depends on how you like to use gates. By default, the gate opens when the notes are played and cross over the threshold, letting the sounds through. If you flip it, the gate acts in the opposite way, so the sound is let through when notes are not being played. It's sort of like sidechain compression, except a tad more extreme. Because the notes or tones don't really matter on the muted track, we're only using it for a gate source. I like to take this concept and use it with existing MIDI data in my track. Just like that. Tip 9. So there are a number of options the Ableton developers did not build into the final product, but that you can activate by using an options.txt file with particular flags. On a Mac, the options.txt file lives in your user's username, library, preferences, Ableton, and then the version of Live that you're using. Ableton does publish what you can add to the options.txt to tweak some of Live's settings at this URL, but this is by no means a comprehensive list of what you can do with your options.txt file. If you add the enable map to siblings flag in this file, the next time you open Live and go to a drum rack and tweak a parameter, you'll notice if you right-click on that value, you'll see copy to siblings, which basically takes the value you just adjusted and applies it to all other sounds in that drum rack. This is particularly handy when using Ableton slice to MIDI functionality. And perhaps you want to set up a similar envelope for all the slices. Or just boost the volume of all the samples in one drum rack and not have to click into each sample and adjust it. Tip 10. Another option that you can add to options.txt is flag show device slots. This activates a cool selector in session mode which gives you a view of which devices are on which track. This is a helpful way to diagnose any CPU issues, but also gives you a visual reference to make sure you've processed every channel in the way you want. So it's easy to see if a channel is missing EQ or compression or something like that. I've never used Logic, but I feel like this style of viewing devices is part of the Logic GUI that people really like. Thanks for watching these tips. I hope they've helped you. Now go make music, and also listen to my music.